Where are they taking us? Some sort of a quarry?
Sorry, we had to make it a pretty big one.
All right, let's get on with it.
There's no point in being grown up if you can't be childish sometimes.
There's an instruction at the bottom. What does it say?
Pull to open.
Yes, and what do you do?
I push.
Every single time, 700 years.
Is it sensible to go on?
Probably not.
Hi!
A mission to... You know, I really think you might.
Here come the drums!
So here it comes, the sound of drums. Here come the drums, here come the drums.
Dun 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 dun. Hello, welcome to Pull to Open, an ongoing quest to watch all of Doctor Who in random order. I'm Pete Paschal.
And I'm Chris Taylor, and we're a couple of guys who have written about Doctor Who professionally and watch it as amateurs and love the show, even as we criticize.
Yes, I write about Doctor Who professionally, personally, in all the capacities you can possibly write about something. Even academically. I think I do remember submitting a Doctor Who short story when I was in 9th grade or something like that, and it was kind of an original, but it was borrowed a lot of, so shall we say, names and themes from the series. But it was super fun. Anyway, that's a digression right off the bat. Wow, look at that. That was like 6 seconds in.
We have that in common because I think it was one of the first short stories I ever wrote. Age like 5 or 6 was a story about, Doctor Who, because of course.
Oh, Chris, I've lost you.
The Baker Doctor. Are they still here?
Oh, no, there we go. Somehow missed.
Hey.
Yeah, that was weird. All right, we've got some editing to do right at the top of the show. That's okay. So wait a minute. Tell me more about your short story.
It's summertime. It's hot back summer. Everyone's going a little crazy. Everything's a little rough around the edges, but it's all super cool. And it's getting a little warm on both coasts.
Is it ever? Yep. We're getting in the 80s and the 90s. Odd, then, that we're going back to the 70s for our show today. Zing, segue.
Yes, nice segue. And I do have just one word for you, Pete. I have one word.
Is it?
Are you listening? Plastics.
Yeah, I hear there's a big future in plastics.
There's a big future and there's a big past in plastics.
Indeed. Lots of plastic going on this week here at Season 8, Episode 1, or Serial 1, Terror of the Autons.
Indeed. And before we get into that, let's just catch up with how Pull to Open is doing on the socials.
Yeah.
We've had another fine week on TikTok.
We did. We had a great week on TikTok. So we the Randomizer last found us at School Reunion in the modern era in David Tennant's second season. It was a good time, and people like the Sarah Jane Smith, talking about her. We had a couple of good clips from the show. Whenever you talk about Sarah, you can't not love like her impact on Who, and we praised her a lot for being the greatest companion of all time. And the cool thing about School Reunion, it really unpacks some sort of basic fundamentals of the Doctor and his relationship with his companions. That's all there. I mean, go back and listen to the show. It was a really good conversation. But I found on TikTok a lot of people were very like, yeah, man, this is great, and wanted to sort of share in that celebratory tone of her and what was a really solid episode. Yep.
And we are getting close to 1,000 followers on TikTok.
We are. Yeah, we're a little over 800 right now. It's going well. It's always, every time we get a video, we pick up some more than others. I have no idea what goes viral and what doesn't. For a minute there, I thought people didn't like the old stuff, and then we did some stuff with the original TARDIS crew, and it was just phenomenal. But we really love to hit 1,000 by July 4th or sometime in the summer. If you guys can tell your friends, share the videos on TikTok. We'd really love it. It's definitely where we're most active on social right now. And like I say, we're sharing clips of the show all the time, and it's super fun. So we really want to push to get 1,000 followers on TikTok. Please help the show. Tell your friends. We'd love to just take this thing to the moon, baby.
Yes, and if you're the first follower past 1,000, and you let us know that you're the first follower past 1,000, we'll send you some sort of plastic device.
Oh yeah, it might be a daffodil.
Might be a daffodil. Might be a troll doll. We might just show up at your front door as an Auton.
Oh, wow, that's a big one. That's the 10,000th follower.
Well, I've got to wait for the appointment to get my finger guns fitted, but I'm looking forward to that.
Cool.
So
I get the finger guns all the time. Didn't realize it was an Auton thing. Hey guys, that's the noise you have to make now with finger guns.
I think the Nestine consciousness heard of finger guns. It was just like way too literal.
This is how humans
you like finger guns, humans, do you? Okay, let me show you finger guns.
Yes. Shall we get into the episode? Terror of the Autons.
Yes.
Okay, guys, we're doing Terror of the Autons this week. As you know, we're taking to a random episode of Doctor Who every week by the Randomizer. We will find out where we're going next week at the end of this show. But we're starting out here in the Pertwee era with Terror of the Autons. A very notable episode for many reasons. A lot of firsts.
Yep.
Definitely kind of it's the second season of Pertwee. So it's already a reboot. It's already been rebooted, and this kind of reboots. It's a soft reboot of the Pertwee era, which honestly I'm a little weird. Like didn't think there was anything wrong with season 7. You know, I'm actually kind of a big fan of season 7. We already visited season 7
we did Inferno.
Yep.
And it's sort of interesting from a randomizer perspective. It is fascinating how just these random numbers are taking us to stories where we can see a definitive pattern. We've seen a lot of master stuff. We've gone from one end of the master to the other. We've gone from Missy, all the way back to now Roger Delgado. But also the randomizer took us to Inferno. So we can really see the difference that was made between season 7 and season 8, between what was probably one of the most adult seasons of Doctor Who.
Right.
And a reboot that's sort of like a terrifying child's nightmare, kind of a fever dream. That Terror of the Autons is, and it's now in color. I believe that. So I haven't seen the whole thing before. I've seen like a bit of episode 1. You saw it in black and white.
Yeah, and honestly, I think I heard at some point they found the colored version or the colorized. I actually don't know what happened. I imagine they just found a print they finally found a full print of the color. But there was a while there that didn't exist, and when it was broadcast on PBS numerous times in the 80s and 90s, it was in black and white. And I never actually have seen Terror of the Autons in color until now.
So the tapes were wiped. I've got the details here. The tapes were wiped before 77. BBC Enterprises had a 16mm film recording in black and white. And then there was a good quality color off-air recording made in America. Thank you, America. That was premiered at the 20th anniversary Jamboree in 1983. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So that's been around for a while. I guess maybe it took a while for it to get into the BBC's library.
Yeah. I'm sure it got held up by the BBC, hierarchy and bureaucracy, which the corporation is sort of famous for.
Yeah,
but,
and also know in the mid-'80s, kind of fell out of favor with the higher-ups. The show fell out of favor with the higher-ups at the BBC, and so probably wasn't a huge priority until things had changed. But I was really glad to see it. Honestly, it took me by surprise when I hit play on BritBox. Feel free to sponsor us, by the way. When I hit play, and it was just it went right into the color version of the Pertwee titles, and I was like, oh wow, it must be the color version. And it's well, we can get into it, but I think it's sort of almost a different experience when you see it in color.
Especially, it opens at a circus. Like there are so many colorful locations and colorful versions of the Autons that I can't even imagine how dreary this would be in black and white.
Yeah, but let's get into it in a minute. I want to get more into how this comes across and some of the themes they leaned into for this story in this season. But first, we have to do our regular setting the stage feature here on Pull to Open, which is TLDW, where one of us runs down the plot in record time. Mostly so we don't feel obligated to go in chronological order and be very organized about this podcast. But it's also super fun. And Chris, I believe you are up this week.
I am up. This is like, I've said this before, it's like being on a game show, and I feel like I'm now in the soundproof booth with the headphones on.
Right, no notes.
And there's a whole studio audience staring at me. And I have to remember everything I saw on the Doctor Who conveyor belt.
There's a lot in this one. I don't envy
There's
you
a
on
lot
this one.
in this one. It's a very disjointed fever dream.
Yeah.
But let's see.
Let's get it going. So you get
how much I can.
You get 30 seconds per episode. So you're going to have a full 2 minutes to describe what happened in Terror of the Autons. And that time begins right now.
Okay, so the Master appears in a horse box at a circus and hypnotizes the circus owner and steals a Nestine energy unit from the Air and Space Museum, and then he goes to a radio telescope and he shrinks one of the scientists there, and he kidnaps another one. And meanwhile, the Doctor is at UNIT and he's trying to fix his TARDIS, and he gets a new assistant, Jo Grant, but he doesn't really like her. But he decides to take her on anyway, and Jo goes to the plastics factory where the Master has also now infiltrated this plastics factory, where he starts to build this new kind of plastic, and then he starts to... He produces first a plastic chair that swallows the troublesome production manager at the factory. Then he produces a plastic doll that he uses to... kill the father of the founder of the factory because he's resistant to hypnotism. And the Doctor is able to retrieve this doll, and he and Jo figure out that it's activated by heat from the Bunsen burner in the Doctor's lab, which Mike Yates is using to make cocoa for no apparent reason. And then meanwhile, the Master comes in disguise as a telephone repairman to install a phone in the Doctor's lab, which strangles the Doctor. And I've completely forgotten the fact that the Doctor went to the circus and got beaten up and got kidnapped by policemen who turned out to be Autons, and UNIT saved them. And then the Master reveals his grand scheme to populate plastic daffodils throughout the southeast of England and kill thousands of people. And the daffodils are activated by shortwave radio, and UNIT wants to call in an airstrike on the Master's van.
Done time.
Oh,
no,
the airstrike fails.
Chris.
They call it off.
Yeah.
Wow,
got pretty close. You got about...
so much that happens.
There is so much that happens in this. It's very twisty and turny. There's a lot of the Master doing multiple things to sort of achieve his goal. He's got to that museum scene you talk about in the first, it's really blink and you miss it. You know, like it's like 2 seconds. There's not even a set. You know, you can see that when they knock out that guard in episode 1, it's like a fake background, and it's,
oh God, I missed so much.
Yeah, and there's you could never. I don't know if you could do it in 2 minutes, because it's like they go back and forth with the plastic factory and Farrell Senior's house, and there's multiple cars and chases and things happening in cars, in addition to the horse box and the circus, and then the quarry, and it's just on and on, right? Like, I mean, they're just jumping around. You could see sort of the influence. And this is what I picked up on more so this time around, partly because it's sort of color and jarred with my expectations, and partly because I've seen a lot of 70s TV, since I first saw it. And it's like, oh yeah, they're obviously very much leaning into like the James Bond and sort of secret agent series. I mean, this is very much a hallmark of the Pertwee era. He was, the James Bond Doctor. But this isn't just like he's dashing and sort of a Bond figure. Like, the whole story is structured much more like a James Bond adventure with lots of action, lots of chases, obviously an evil mastermind, and that sort of continues. That is very evident here, and it continues throughout the season.
So I didn't, just to close the loop, I would mark myself down for missing the Time Lord, a random Time Lord.
Oh yeah, the random Time Lord,
who just appears in midair on the gantry, on the platform of the radio tower, to tell the Doctor that the Master has escaped and come to Earth, and he's just wearing a bowler hat, and it's super weird.
It's crazy weird. Who is that guy?
Yeah.
Like, is that guy from the High Council, I guess? Or is he the CIA? Like, they seem to know each other. He's like, oh, it's you.
Yeah.
Like, he, like, almost recognizes this guy, I guess. And so, it would be nice to know, like, is he Barusa? Is he... I'm not sure who this guy's supposed to be.
How can they just travel through space and time like that? Is it... I mean, why do they need TARDISes if they can do that? It's a very, very bizarre scene, and it's only the second canonical appearance of Time Lords, right? Mm-hmm. Do we count the meddling monk? We never know if he's Time Lord.
Yeah, because they hadn't been portrayed as sort of these godlike beings and thought of that way until the War Games. So I don't think you can really quite count the monk, even though, yes, and obviously retconning, he's a Time Lord. But this whole thing, like, where they're clearly still figuring out what the Time Lords are and what they can do. Yeah. And so this guy sort of appears out of nowhere and floats there in space, can sort of drag and drop where he is. He's like, I guess if you wanted to really retcon this, you could go like, well, he probably had a vortex manipulator or something like it, some kind of anti-grav to keep him floating, and et cetera, et cetera. You could write off all the tech stuff, but here, like, this is well before they've sort of established, that the High Council and the Celestial Intervention Agency and all this other stuff. Like, is this guy from one of those, the other? It's like they're all always just sort of still revealed as called the Time Lords.
Yes. So 2 points to their credit. In this appearance, I think that, first of all, they give themselves a lot of wiggle room in the way that they introduce this Time Lord. Like, this by not revealing a lot of details, or indeed any details about the Time Lords in this appearance, they're like, leaving it up to future showrunners to tell us a lot more, and they're not closing the door on any kind of explanation. Secondly, I like that he sort of thinks he's going to fit in on Earth by wearing this super elaborate upper class bowler hat outfit, which seems very Time Lordy to me. Like, they would take one look at Earth and go, oh, the Doctor's in England, I should wear a bowler hat and a tie, and I'll just blend right in. I'll be there's a certain amount of class consciousness in this whole story, which is super interesting, and we can get into that. But
I think it could be even less naive than that, rather, where the Time Lord goes like, okay, so I need to appear on Earth, and let's find the most aristocratic appearance, since that would fit a person of my prestige and position. That sort of arrogance, perhaps, is what's bleeding out.
And the fact that he would go to great lengths to disguise himself, but then just sort of forget to actually appear on the ground, hover in midair. That seems quite sort of arrogant Time Lordy.
Gravity is really just a human thing, like, it's just, okay, we do what we want in the cosmos.
I love it. And then to close the other loop on I sort of failed to mention the end of the episode, and how the evil plot gets defeated, which is that the Master was trying to summon the Nestine consciousness using these radio telescopes, and then he's up there summoning it. And the Doctor's like, hey, the Nestines aren't going to distinguish between you and the human race, which is sort of weird, because the Master seems to think that the Nestine consciousness is going to destroy the humans and the Doctor, but fails to consider himself.
This sort of brings up the uncomfortable, like, unraveling of, like, wait a minute, how did this all get kicked off in it. So he never called anyone at the Nestines to say, I'm going to do this. Like, just to make sure I'll be off on the moon or something like that. Or in my TARDIS. Like, it's like, okay, so in other words, the origin of this whole plot seems a little nebulous because if it's just the Master, okay, and he hasn't talked to the Nestines about his plan, then he just kind of shows up, okay. But then he clearly does, right? Because he gets the thing from the museum, and then he uses that to contact the Nestines. So surely then there is some exchange of like, well, I'm going to help you out, and just don't kill me or give me control of the world, or when you're done, or I don't know, like what exactly. Like, it's not spelled out. Like, what was the plan, dude? Like, literally, you were just going to
and he just
get them to come here and just kill everybody, like, and that there was no more thought to it than that.
And is there any significance at all to the fact that he chose a chair, a troll doll, and a flower to build first, while also building these sort of basic human-shaped Autons? And it just it's weird because when the Doctor is first told of that the Master has escaped and he's come to Earth, he's like that. First of all, he says that jackanapes, which is just such a lovely word, jackanapes. But then he's also like, he's an unimaginative plodder. Well, that is not really what we see from the Master here, or in any of the Master's evil plots going forward. The Master's evil plots are nuts. I mean, he's batshit. We know this. He's batshit. She's batshit when she becomes Missy. And we've seen some of the plot, and it's like, I'm going to go to England in the time of King John and prevent the signing of the Magna Carta. Okay.
Right. I mean, there's usually some kind of power thing, whether he was trying to find a super weapon to bully the universe around, or the one time I think that one of my favorite Master episodes is certainly Last of the Time Lord, Sound of Drums, Utopia, because you finally see what it is like when he wins, and like his vision of this sort of empire with him on a throne and the Doctor humiliated, and he has power with lots of weaponry, I guess, which is kind of like, okay, I guess that's what he's going for. So if you work backwards from that to the other Master episodes, including this one is pretty low on the sort of make sense scale, because it's like, so you're just trying to kill a bunch of people, and mostly in London and England, I guess, to do what? Like, I mean, I guess it turns everybody, like the idea is like the world will be in disarray and not be able to resist the Nestines. So it'll be easier for them to like invade and conquer. Which is
such
like,
a wonderfully English perspective. It's like if we take out the home counties, the Earth will collapse.
Yeah, yeah.
It's definitely the attitude of the British Empire right there.
Yeah, I guess that was like, because the unit stories were technically in the future, there was probably some thinking that the British prominence would rise again or something on the world stage. I'm not really sure what the rationale is there, but
well, no, you'll notice that there's a British Space Museum.
There is.
In this, which is the only appearance of this supposed space museum in Doctor Who.
Well, and you gotta like wonder, like, so there's a Nestine unit, the glowy dodecahedron, in a space museum. Well, what's on the label there, and why is it in the museum? And wait a minute, like, so like we tend to think of the Christmas invasion as the first like official, hey, aliens exist. Part, this is now part of the world as we know it. That like the first time in Doctor Who that was sort of official. But actually, if you think back to the Pertwee era, they sort of kind of had that. And I think this is a little bit of evidence of that, because it's like, if you look at the previous season, there was the Ambassadors of Death, and there was these sort of Martians that came, and they sort of don't bat an eye at some point, like, oh, they're Martians, and now they're ambassadors, and we're going to have relations with them, I guess. And so I think in this sort of, the day after tomorrow setting that unit is supposed to be, there was a little more of that casual sense that, oh, humans are starting to contact the places other than Earth, extraterrestrials, and that's becoming more and more the norm. It gets forgotten about after a while, but I think at this point in the Pertwee era, it's kind of like starting to stick. And maybe I'm reading too much into like the 20-second scene, but it is like someone must have thought like like nesting consciousness. The label says nesting consciousness vessel. By the way,
maybe some journalists would pick up on it.
Yeah.
I really have to fault the journalists of early 70s, alternate Britain or early 80s or whenever this is supposed to be. They're not really on the game. Like none of them have noticed the showroom dummies,
right.
the year previously that it's an attack people.
Well, I'm sure it was students, Chris.
Yeah.
That's what I heard.
We need a J. Jonah Jameson scene where all these journalists come back to the office and the editor just doesn't believe them.
Well, what is the God? I just was watching The Crown, but there is the whole idea of the press freedom not being quite as good, absolute in Great Britain, and you had these orders to sort of stop press. So you could make the case that they were tried to be on the game, but because every single alien in the 60s and 70s would invade Great Britain, no one ever heard about them because they were the press was suppressed.
We do know from Mordrin Undead that both the Doctor and Brigadier and anyone involved in the unit signed the Official Secrets Act,
right?
Which is sort of Official Secrets Act has been used. It's kind of a very controversial piece of legislation that was used throughout the 20th century, and I guess still could be. I don't even know if it's been repealed. That has kind of famously clamped down on a lot of publication of books. Like there was a famous book in the 80s called Spycatcher. Publication was halted because of the Official Secrets Act, and it ended up getting printed in Australia, and people would sort of, ship copies from Australia just to read it. And it was, it's just dumb stuff that the government would sort of clamp down on. So I could definitely see some sort of, Men in Black style sub-unit of unit that just goes around and wipes people's memories, prevents everyone from talking to journalists, and you clamp down on publication of any of this stuff with Official Secrets Act, just to double down.
Yeah, and you could even take the Torchwood retcon as an actual retcon, so to speak, in that presumably Torchwood has been operating in the background the whole time of the classic series. And obviously a retcon, but as they have the quote unquote retcon drug in Torchwood that maybe they were as the Doctor was doing all this stuff, they would wander around in the background, wiping the memories of people and ensuring it was never written about.
Maybe since the Autons were going around handing out daffodils in their super scary carnival face hats.
I would have run screaming from those guys if I was a kid. Like,
really?
Wow.
Seriously. I mean, that was, this episode was sort of famously used in a show on British TV that discussed was Doctor Who too scary for children? And they showed, they used the Daleks from another sort of contemporary Dalek serial, I can't remember which one, but they used these images of the Autons with those masks on to say, hey kids, is this too scary for you?
Yeah, I think the Autons are actually a pretty good example because, one, they are creepy, and they're especially creepy in this episode. But the whole idea of, and it's a great, hasn't used the word trope because I think it's pejorative, but it is a great trope of Doctor Who where they essentially take an everyday item and turn it into something homicidal as your monster of the week. And taking store window dummies, mannequins, and, basically doing what everyone has imagined, them coming alive and then potentially killing people, I mean, it's really cool, and you can see why they reused it several times. It's but it could be certainly as a kid, I remember walking into being everyone's a little bit creeped out by mannequins because of the whole Uncanny Valley there. And I think there's a case to be made, even though I certainly wouldn't I wouldn't make it. I think it's okay to be a little bit scared, even if you are a kid.
Anyway, so that puts me in mind that, UNIT could just sort of wipe people's memories by going around handing out their own daffodils. They kind of just spray you and you go, what was I thinking of? Oh.
Nice. just like get Will Smith to hand out these
Exactly.
daffodils alongside Tommy Lee Jones, and that
So, two things we should talk about this episode before we go much further. I guess three things. We should talk about Pertwee and kind of the assholishness of the Doctor in this story. We should talk about Delgado, obviously.
Absolutely.
This is my first experience of him, and he went down like a fine glass of champagne. And then we
As
should
he
talk about Joe and Mike freaking Yates, who I have to say on this outing is the most forgettable Doctor Who companion.
Yeah, agreed. Do you want to start there?
Yeah, let's start with that, because Mike Yates, like, I had to throw in the Coco in my TLDW, even though that was costing me time, because that was just so dumb in my mind, and so kind of speaks to the fact that Mike Yates is this non-entity, because he thinks that, I guess he's flirting with Joe Grant, right? Because he was brought in by the producers as a potential love interest for Katy Manning's character. And his idea of flirting with Joe Grant is like, hey, have you ever had Army Cocoa? You haven't lived until you've tried Army Cocoa.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the hell is different about Army Cocoa? It's from a tin. You went to get a tin, and you heated up water. What is different? It's not exactly, Spanish hot chocolate.
Yeah, he's got his eye on Joe, and I think that's very non-committal. I mean, here's the thing with Mike Yates. I mean, he's really forgettable, honestly, not just in this episode. I hate to sort of slam on Richard Franklin. I think Richard Franklin's fine, and he has a few moments, but it's like, we already have Benton. Did we need another Benton? And the only sort of memorable scene I can sort of think of Yates, and it wasn't even in this episode, was in something in Day of the Daleks, where he and Benton sort of have a kind of a funny officer versus enlisted man moment, which isn't even clear here. You don't even really know his rank or what he's doing, and like how is he different from the Brigadier, like, and Benton. I guess they felt they needed another regular in the same way, like, okay, Star Trek has, obviously your three leads, but also like a bunch of people you just want to see regularly, and it makes it more of a universe. And that's fine. It's just he's not really given much to do, except for this one scene where he's coming on to Joe.
Yeah, and if that's coming on, I mean, he needs to work on his technique.
Well, I don't think it is, because I think it's, and I sort of tweeted about this a little bit, like, it might look like romantic interest to quote-unquote the untrained eye, but that was more just a knowing wink at the idea that he was, at least in novels, I believe, sort of his backstory is that he's gay.
Interesting.
So, which kind of puts a lot of other scenes that are to come in new context. Yates eventually gets a more interesting story than most of the other unit guys, because spoiler alert, he ends up betraying unit later on, and then gets sort of a dishonorable discharge. But that's not the end of the character. It actually comes back in the final Pertwee episode. So he sort of, like, his arc gets a little more interesting.
That is good to know. I'd not encountered him before. I thought he was a little milquetoast in this. You've made me immediately more interested in him by suggesting that he's closeted, and I wish that Doctor Who in the 70s had been able to discuss things like that. Like, that would have made for an absolutely fascinating character.
Well, and I wish it's funny. I recently listened to a Doctor Who audio. I forget what it's called. It's about Hornets or something. That it's actually multiple stories, but with Tom Baker. So it's really great to have, Baker. You can't go wrong with Tom Baker. But
you really
Richard
can't.
Franklin,
you could be reading the phone book.
Richard Franklin is the main sort of companion in it, as sort of an older Captain Yates, and he's good, and he gives it his all. It's just I wish they'd sort of gotten a little more into the sort of unofficial history and sort of what he had been up to since his retirement from unit in it. Oh man, it's killing me. I got to find out what this thing is called. I'm actually gonna Google it. But
while you Google, I can talk about Katy Manning, who, interestingly, before we leave Mike Yates, I was interested to discover that they interviewed Ian Marter for the role, like later became Harry Sullivan, who I think would have probably been a stronger actor. Again, sorry, Richard Franklin, but it's interesting to think that we could have seen Harry come in at a lot earlier stage in different guys in unit soldier form.
Eventually,
Katy Manning.
Eventually, Ian Marter came on, but not first as Harry Sullivan. He was like he was a guest star in Carnival of Monsters. I remember this. He was he was a sailor and kind of a romantic interest for another character. But anyway, I digress a bit. But it's funny, like how Doctor Who has these players. I mean, even Nick Courtney had been in the Daleks Master Plan before he became the Brigadier. So there were like these sort of favorites of the show that sort of come back and do various things. By the way,
and Colin Baker, of course,
Vivaldi,
famously,
yes. But Hornet's Nest, and it's like 5 or 6 different sort of audio adventures, all very fun stuff. And yeah, if you like your Tom Baker and your Richard Franklin, there's plenty here for you.
There's a Big Finish recommendation of the week, which I think should be a thing.
It should be a thing. Absolutely.
It should be a thing.
Anyway, back to Jo.
She was the last actress who was interviewed for the role. Katy Manning was the last actress interviewed for the role. Forgot her script and had to improvise on the spot. So it's sort of amazing that she was chosen. But she is, let's not beat about the bush. The fact that this is a deliberate downgrading of the Doctor's companion from Liz Shaw. Who was seen as too intelligent, and not enough of a foil for the Doctor.
I would, it's unfortunate for the show and for me personally. I'll add, because as you know, Chris, Liz and I, we're occasionally we're on again, off again, but I mean we have a fondness there, we have a connection.
Yes.
Yes, I'm very Liz curious, but Liz, very strong woman, very smart woman. I think going from her to Jo was a deliberate choice, and I think Jo comes into her own, and I think she is not given the best start here, both in terms of like episode 1 and the serial itself. Like she's kind of bumbling a lot until the very end. She is hypnotized by the Master right off the bat. She's not sort of given a lot of moments until she sort of frees herself from the ropes at the end and proves herself a little bit useful, and even some of that is a little contrived. So it's not the greatest start to her character, although I did like how the Doctor he's just too much of a softie to let her go. It's a little bit
too much of a coward.
Cute. Yeah, or that, I suppose.
Which is weird because the Brigadier is like, yeah, sure, we can get rid of her, but you have to tell her yourself. And it's with the odd jobs that she gets. Like there's no progression to it. Her first job is to it's almost her first job, right? To go to the plastics factory and be a spy. Check out all these plastics factories, and then like she's downgraded to ordering stuff on the phone and handing the Doctor a scalpel.
Right.
And
definitely more assistant than companion.
Yeah, for sure. And she has this line which is rendered in the BritBox subtitles as, "Oh, you are a Dolly Scotsman." I think she's actually saying Jolly Scotsman. Which is a thing. It's kind of a common name for a pub in the UK, and that just seems like a wonderful sort of endearing, quirky line for her to say, and I wanted more of that from Jo. Who would of course eventually endear herself in many other ways and become one of the favored companions.
Well, I contrast her sort of bumblingness here and her less than great treatment to later in her run, and one of my favorite episodes of the whole Pertwee era, honestly, is, I've mentioned already, Carnival of Monsters. And she is very much on top of the situation, and you know, you get the sense the Doctor and Joe are much more partners by that point, and that's a clear evolution throughout. So she comes along. I think she gets a little more loose too. I think Katy Manning is sort of just a very naturally effusive personality, and she's had one appearance. I think the only appearance I can think of since she ended her run was in the Sarah Jane Adventures.
Yes, I have seen that one, and
she's fantastic. And you know, clearly, you know, just very much, you know, having so much fun coming back to the role,
and still has that bubbly exuberance that we love about Jo. And she's just adorable.
I was lucky enough to, this was a long time ago, it was in the 80s, I saw Katy Manning at a Doctor Who convention, and she's a delight. She's a delight. She's been like an actress very much sort of in the style of Carol Channing, and just, you know, very happy and positive and warm, very, very completely herself in all the answers when these audience Q&As that they had with the cast. And I remember one person asked her at one point, would you ever want to play a bad guy? And she answered, oh yes, I would love to be a complete bitch, you know. And I really want to play a complete bitch, you know. Like, it was so funny. She brought the house down. You know, you could see like if anything, she's probably holding back a bit, like quite a bit in the. I mean, you know, you don't want anyone overacting, but I mean, she is just very effusive and just a delight. So, you know, I'm super glad she got on the show. It's too bad we didn't have Liz longer. And you know, if you see this episode as kind of the beginning of a journey, I think it really works. If you're just looking at this episode as a standalone, I think you kind of come away with Joe's kind of Joe needs some work.
And speaking of Joe, I mean, it is his reaction to Joe that really begins the Doctor's just sheer assholery in this story. And I wonder, Pete, if we shouldn't sort of introduce a regular feature of sort of how likable was the Doctor in this story, because it's definitely, as we've seen recently with a couple of Hartnell stories that we did, it's definitely applicable to Hartnell, but that was known. I'd never really thought of it as being applicable to Pertwee, but let's go through it. In the Terror of the Autons, Pertwee, like, first of all, he mistakes Jo as the tea lady, right?
Yeah, which is
okay, sexist.
You could kind of, yeah, it is, but I mean, you could get a little bit like, okay, it is the 70s, so you could sort of correct a little bit for the era. In the script, it's basically the tea lady is the only person who has security clearance, apparently, other than the Brigadier, which is also arguably sexist, but it definitely shows what priorities the Doctor has with regard to.
I mean, if this was real life, the Russians would have used this to infiltrate units from day one, you know, with the Russian tea lady, you know, perfectly embedded.
And if it's Mad Men, it would have been the whiskey lady, or you know, they've always got security clearance for your refreshments. So there's that. Starts that.
He denigrates Unit, which we sort of expect, but he seems to have a nastier cast to it. Like he has that joke that goes down like a lead balloon about, you know, I've always thought military intelligence was a contradiction in terms, which could be funny in the right circumstance, but he's just sort of being so surly, and he's kind of ignoring Unit when they're trying to help.
Yeah.
You know,
Joe even accuses him of being childish at one point. So I feel like the show's a little bit self-aware of this, and they're kind of clearly playing up a bit of a friendly rivalry between the Doctor and the Brigadier a bit, and trying to contrast them. It's just coming across, though, on the Doctor's side is like, what are you doing, man? Like, he's laying out the plan.
And I think maybe one of the reasons it doesn't work, that we sort of intuitively kind of don't like it, is that for all of his putting on a brave face, Nicholas Courtney was not having a great time during the filming of Terror of the Autons. He actually had a bout of depression. Oh, wow. And he missed a couple of days of filming because of it, had to be sedated. Kind of, you know, like the depression was that bad he couldn't sleep. So his doctor sedated him. I think he spent like a couple of days in hospital.
Oh, wow, that's right.
He also may have not been doing well financially at this stage, because I read that he had to do a little bit of work as a building laborer between seasons.
Can you imagine if you're like on a dig, whatever, a construction site somewhere, and hey, are you a brigadier? I
can't imagine the brigadier like not being head of the construction foreman within a day,
right?
Ordering people around. But it's also sort of weird because even more famously, Tom Baker was a construction worker briefly between acting gigs when he was named as Doctor Who. I just love this idea that sometime in the 70s you could go be a builder's labourer on a construction site somewhere in England, and you run into Nicholas Courtney and Tom Baker.
It's basically like hanging out at the trendiest clubs in LA. And like seeing your favorite actors, it's like no, you go to the construction sites. That's where you see them. So people in the know.
Very Britain in the 70s. But the one thing that really drove home how much of an asshole the Doctor is in this episode, and the one part where I really didn't like him, is there's a guy from the Ministry who comes in who's called Brown Rose, which is okay, very funny, Robert Holmes. And before he's even got to hear what he has to say, which is important stuff, this guy from the Ministry is trying to tell you that thousands of people are going to die or are already dying. And, the Doctor's got to put two and two together and connect it with the plastic daffodils and all this. But instead of even listening, the Doctor kind of just shuts the guy down and pulls the ultimate dick move of saying, I just had drinks with your boss in our club. And this is, I think, another point where the class consciousness of Britain in the 70s comes in, where I don't know how that's supposed to be read. Is it that the Doctor is sort of getting his own against, meddling functionaries by pretending to have had drinks with the boss? Or does the Doctor really go to a club and kind of hobnob with the highest levels of British government? Like, what is going on there? But either way, it has not aged well. And it reads to us like just like it's one of the biggest faux pas I think I've ever seen the Doctor commit.
Yeah, it's a weird way for this character to big dog someone. I get the Doctor wants, sometimes needs to big dog someone or wants to, and just says, yeah, I happen to know all this stuff about the universe is usually enough. Tennant's done that a number of times. I really, it's actually a really great moment in what was the ship one? Oh my god, everything's going. Oh, Voyage of the Damned, and someone's like, "Who are you?" And he's like, "I'm a Time Lord, and I'm from the constellation of Castor, so I'm going to save your life." It's very much like that's a good big dog moment. This is like a weird big dog moment because he's kind of like, well, I'm more aristocratic than you, which is not at all what the Doctor is supposed to be. And I guess it's a little bit. This is again sort of what I think it dovetails a little bit with what I was saying at the beginning, where it's very sort of James Bondy, and you could see sort of, even though Bond isn't quite that, but like the sort of circles Bond runs in and the things he deals with, like it's kind of a Bond line. Where a guy like James Bond has to be very familiar and intimate with the highest levels of government and, in not just Britain, but the world. So it's kind of like that, whereas it doesn't quite fit with what we know for Doctor Who and the Doctor.
And it's also not played in a suave way. It's played in a, I demand to talk to your manager kind of way.
Yes, he's mean
it's
about
the Doctor.
it.
It's the Doctor being Karen.
Jinx.
Yeah,
and
totally. It works as well. That's the worst thing about it, is that Brown Rose immediately becomes obsequious. And you're like, oh, Doctor, what have you done? You've punched down.
So I'd like to sort of throw in one extra sort of Doctor being a jerk moment or not great moment on your list. And it's an interesting scene that we should unpack because there's some interesting background to it. And it's actually the very final scene where he says the Master's escaped, and he kind of shrugs on it. He's like, oh, whatever, he escaped. Well, we'll encounter him again because he can't escape Earth. We took his dematerialization circuit, and he'll be around. And it's like, well, aren't you worried about that? And he goes, no, I'm kind of looking forward to it. And he kind of smiles, and then it roll credits. And it's a very odd note to end on, given, like, honestly, even at the time, I mean, like, given what has just happened and the number of people who have died. Now, I'm going to, throw a little background here. So apparently that was not how the scene was originally written. It was written much more serious, and the Doctor would said something along the lines of, the Master's here to stay, and he's going to keep trying, and we're going to face each other again and again until I destroy him or he destroys me. And apparently they decided that was too serious and too dark, so they kind of did a complete 180. And essentially
made it darker still. By accident.
Exactly.
Because the Doctor is suddenly okay with the destruction and devastation that the Master wreaks. I mean, we know that there is this affection between the two of them.
Right.
And one of Delgado's finest moments, of many fine moments in Terror of the Autons, is where he says that, he has so few equals. He has so few people who can match him, wit for wit. And he's like, they don't last for it. And there's a sadness to it. Like, this is why he has sought out the Doctor, who we come to understand as a previous adversary. They've run up against each other before. They knew each other in Time Lord school. The Master did better in cosmic sciences than the Doctor did. The Doctor doesn't like the way the Master plans. Like, that's his biggest issue. He's a plotter. So there's this backstory, there's this history to them. They are designed to be Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty. That was the origin story of the Master, as they needed a Moriarty figure because they realized that the Doctor was Sherlock Holmes.
And that the Brigadier was Watson.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it's perfectly lines up. So for the Doctor at the end to sort of kind of relish meeting the Master again is good, but to smile... Like, Pertwee's a better actor than that. We could have had a moment of him sort of wrestling with his conscience of, on the one hand, this was terrible, but on the other hand, wow, I'm sort of weirdly attracted to doing battle with the Master,
Right.
And
it's actually made my exile more interesting all of a sudden.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they don't deal a lot with the Doctor's exile in here, and it's sort of represented by the fact that we don't see inside his TARDIS. We certainly don't see inside the Master's TARDIS. But we do have the indication of the exile. It's around the edges. The Time Lords have basically come to taunt the Doctor, as well as informed him of the Master, like, haha, you're still stuck on Earth.
Right.
But from the start, he's sort of trying to unlock his TARDIS. And that's why he's pissed off at Jo, because she messes with his experiments. And then he takes the Master's dematerialization circuit so that he's stuck on Earth. So, like, both of them are now stuck on Earth. So there's some very deep stuff going on about being stuck. Like, this could almost be, if they delved into it, this could have almost been the Doctor Who version of It's a Wonderful Life. With the Doctor as George Bailey, who can never quite leave town. But suddenly he gets a supervillain to deal with. Like, they take it off in a new and interesting direction. So I'm actually, my headcanon is going to be that I'm going to chalk up all of the Doctor's assholishness in this episode to the fact that he is coming to terms with the fact that he's stuck on Earth. He tried to escape an inferno. He made things worse. He went to a parallel world. He'd lost the old TARDIS console. And now here he is, and he's still not fixed the TARDIS, and he's getting super frustrated. So I can understand that, but I just wish they'd made it more explicit.
Yeah, no, agreed. I wish a lot of there was a little more self-awareness and more of an arc to all of this, because all of that tracks, and in sort of hindsight, and I think some of it was there in the era, in the background, like the bigger themes, like. They used Delgado, overused him arguably in this first season, because the Master is in every episode, every serial in his first season. And given what he is supposed to be now, like he's stuck on Earth, or was, and along with the Doctor, and they have this rivalry. So the structure of two powerful people, one good, one evil, in the cosmos, whether it's people or entities, stuck on Earth and carrying out their war or their conflict with Earth as the battleground is sort of a very common thing in sci-fi. And I don't know why I'm thinking of this specific one, but like Transformers is a very prominent one of those where, you know, these robots, big robots, are having a war, or they come to Earth. But even Transformers, I think, more so than the Pertwee era, explored the ramifications for Earth. Like okay, like this isn't our fight. We didn't ask for it. Stuff's getting wrecked and ruined. Our society is actually changing because of what because of your war, and we know you're a good guy, Doctor, but this is not good. You know, like I kind of wish they had gone more in that direction in various times during this era. It's sort of there in the background. There's a point I remember later on, I believe it's the Sea Devils, where the Doctor is like, we need to find the Master, or no, maybe not the Sea Devils. It's basically the Master's still out there, and they need to find him. And it might have been the Time Monster. I'm pretty sure it's the Time Monster. And you know, he gets very panicky about it. The Master, you have to get him. Like, I've had a bad dream about the Master, and he's doing something. So finding the Master your top priority. And the Brigadier is like, actually, it already is. It's priority 1A for unit is find and capture the Master. Or so I do like when it's sort of hinted at here and there, but I think even in hindsight, it could have been done even more explicitly. And I think if they had, that first season of the Master might not have felt quite tedious once you got to, like, you know, the Claws of Axis and Colony in Space, and it's just like, oh man, is every single episode is the Master in it? This is getting a little repetitive, don't you think?
Yeah, so we should talk about Roger Delgado as the Master. He is the master of being the Master. There is no question about that. And
well put.
And he does it in Terror of the Autons, despite having some terrible lines written for him. Like, he, you know, right from the start of "I'm the Master and you will obey me," which is not great. And that was a change. Like, in the original script, I believe he goes straight to the radio telescope, and that's where he gets the energy unit, because it's stored in the secret government facility, which would make a lot more sense.
Right, than the museum. But wait a minute, did you just say that "I'm the Master and you will obey me" is not a good line?
I just think as the very first line, I know it's a classic. I just, you know, it doesn't, like, I tried watching Terror of the Autons before, and I think it felt so cheesy, that opening in the circus. It just felt super cheesy to me that I was afraid that I wouldn't like Delgado's Master. But seeing it again, I like his line reading. I like a lot of his line readings in this. And he even has to cope with the fact that, you know, the Master hadn't thought through his evil plan and has to change at the last minute. Right?
Yeah.
But he delivers that wonderfully.
I think Delgado is superb. I mean, he's so understated, and, you know, I think he's able to turn just lines that would otherwise be dead and give them layers of depth. Like, I really like the line, I forget what episode it is, but he says, "I am many things," you know, and it's just like, that's such a, you know, that's not anything remarkable in any of those words, but with him, with the way he says it, who's saying it, it's incredibly, like, there are many layers to just a simple line like that, and Delgado just pulls it off perfectly.
He's so understated, and I think any actor who ever plays a villain should really study the way that Delgado plays the Master, because he doesn't, like, he's not Anthony Ainley chewing up the scenery,
right?
You know, he's not, you know, John Sim and Michelle Gomez obviously went with the completely other opposite direction of just being batshit. They embraced the batshittery of the Master, but Delgado has a certain sadness to him, you know, there's kind of like infinite sadness in his eyes, and maybe it's the sadness of the fact that Delgado was always cast to play the villain, and he didn't like it. He was always the villain or the Spaniard, as he said, though he was actually born in London.
Yeah, there's a certain weariness to him. I mean, he actually arrives and he seems very seasoned. You know, it's funny. It's like his first episode, and in the grand scheme of the Master, he's kind of bright-eyed and bushy-tailed if you think about it. But like, he says so much with so little. Like just an eye. He doesn't even like raise an eyebrow per so much. It's just like kind of moves his eye a little bit, his eyelid a bit, and he'll kind of look into the, right into camera as with that music. And it's just really effective.
Totally understated. It's very effective for the jokes. Like the Doctor's jokes don't land in this. Like when he's like, and the Brigadier's jokes don't land. Like the whole scene, the cliffhanger at the end of episode 3, where the Doctor's tied up with the telephone wire. Which, by the way, Pertwee does very bad sort of comedy moment of like his eyes goes really big and oh no, I'm being strangled, and the Brigadier's like, oh, I saw you were tied up, or I forget what the exact line is. Terrible line. Doesn't land.
Afraid I cut your connection.
I'm afraid I cut your connection, Doctor. But
I totally agree. That Pertwee moment, by the way, is like the worst. I think it's like, okay, I think that this is the thing that convinced me like Pertwee should not be trying to do his comedy, and this, it's just not called for. And
that was in the original script. It was supposed to be Nicholas Courtney who was tied up with the phone wire and the cliffhanger. So I would have loved to have seen that version. But anyway, the Master delivers, I think, the best joke of Terror of the Autons, where it's the guy's been eaten by the chair, and then they bring in the dad, the owner of the factory, and he's like, oh yeah, he sat down there and he just slipped away.
Yeah, more James Bond, more one-liners.
Yes, very James Bond.
It's
Very
everywhere.
James Bond one-liner, and Delgado is so deadpan on it. It is perfect.
Yeah, 100%.
So I loved his performance, and even though he's saddled with the worst Master name possibly, like the least, like calling himself Colonel Masters,
right,
is kind of like hiding, Luke Skywalker on Anakin Skywalker's planet.
Right.
Naming him Skywalker and putting him with the Skywalker family.
How did you like the tissue compression eliminator in this one?
Yeah, this is the first and the only appearance of the tissue compression eliminator in the Pertwee era. Mm-hmm. And he only uses it once, right, with the one scientist who's upset that his wife always packs hard-boiled eggs.
Right, and he ends up in his own lunchbox.
As a hard-boiled egg, and he has a head like a hard-boiled egg. That's kind of nice little meta joke.
Well, it's funny, because I think in episode 4, he's training it on the Doctor, and it really looks like he's got just a big, like, stogie, like a big cigar there. Yes. It's very... I don't know if it's supposed to be suggestive of that, or they just didn't really have a lot going on in the prop department, but maybe they're just on vacation that week. But it was like, it's almost like his weapon is also understated in a sense.
Yes.
It's like he's just kind of pointing this thing at the Doctor. And I also liked that more than I think almost any other episode, and I think there are a few other moments in the Delgado era that are comparable, but like, he actually seems willing to, like, I'm just going to kill the Doctor right now. Because this is right at the beginning, presumably. I mean, they've met, but this is, they don't have the centuries of rivalry yet. And he's basically just, okay, we've had our fun, and now you're dead. That's not as convincing. I mean, he just doesn't, she doesn't really do that so much later on, because there's much more of a, like, Joker, Batman, I think, thing going on in later seasons and later Doctors, where they really, kind of need each other in a certain way. But it's in this first outing, you kind of convinced, maybe not so much.
That is fascinating, because it's like, it reminds me of how the whole arc of Breaking Bad was summarized as Mr. Chips becomes Scarface. Like that's how how the story was originally described, and it means that the Master's whole kind of Doctor Who series long, multiple season long arc is Moriarty becomes the Joker.
Right, exactly. And he's just here. That. He's the thinker. He's trying to find some version of victory or power as he thinks he needs, and he's not yet obsessed with this rivalry, which he clearly ends up, escalating to a point where he will even destroy Gallifrey just to spite the Doctor, because he hates him.
And here,
so much.
he does leave a calling card for the Doctor. I forget what it is in Terror of the Autons that's just described as a calling card. It's obviously not a very effective one, but he's already they're already kind of flirting.
Yep.
And that flirtation will grow into full-blown love-hate.
Yeah. Full-blown obsession eventually.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny with the line, "I am the master, you will obey me." I don't know if anyone since Ainley has said it, because Ainley liked it, but I think John Sim missed his opportunity to say it when he said at one point where "I am the master" in The Sound of Drums to the Parliament or his cabinet, but then he says he just sort of uses it to introduce the Toclafane. I wonder if he shied away from it. I wonder if he was like, I don't want to.
Well, it's hard to say these days. It's one of those mustache twirling things you can't really say anymore. And it just, for me, it reminds me of a good friend of ours was hanging out with her husband and a close friend, and was, I think she was hungry or something, and she was saying a few things and nobody was listening to it, and she just kind of squeaked out, "Obey me!" which has become a catchphrase. It's become a catchphrase for her ever since, and just like that's immediately what it thinks of. Like we think of it now as almost a sign of weakness to say it.
Right.
It doesn't have that villainy behind it anymore, so it's kind of a relic of the 70s. But I do love the way he says it. I just I think it's a little bit too much.
Yeah, you might not be able to get away with it in an earnest way now. You'd have to do it in a sitcom way. You got to be like Ross from Friends. "Will you obey me? Come on,
obey me!
Come on, guys, obey me." Can I pull out this cigar and get you to obey me? I've got a cigar here. Whoops.
Maybe both the Doctor and the Master are feeling a little insecure. It's like their TARDIS isn't working. Hello, Dr. Freud. And here they are stuck, and sometimes the Master's cigar is just a tissue compression eliminator. So
we have this is I got to say, if you had a Doctor Who drinking game, you would be pretty drunk by the end of this episode, because there's Master appearances, there's classic lines, there's companions, there is a quarry, and it's referred to as a quarry. I remember like Katie.
Joe says, we seem to be heading for some sort of quarry. Is this the first real quarry in Doctor Who? I don't know.
I'm sure there's been... I feel like the whole last season of Troughton was quarries, to be honest. Like, I feel like the Dominators and there's a bunch of episodes, maybe the Seeds of Death, there were quarries all over the place.
But this may be the first self-referential quarry.
I think it definitely might be a first reference to a quarry within the show.
And it's interesting because we've come from one of the Hartnell episodes, The Rescue, where they say something meta like, "Oh, isn't it interesting how we always end up in caves?"
Yeah.
And now here we are with the first quarry mention. It's like, the show could be meta a little bit, long before New Who really took that idea and ran with it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not sure if I prefer quarries to corridors, because that became a thing. But I got to say, if there was ever an episode where they went from quarry to corridor and back again several times, and if there probably have been, that would be really close to getting Doctor Who bingo finished.
Yes, running down corridors would really be the perfect. You need a half quarry, half corridor episode, and that'll be the quintessential Doctor Who.
Did you like we already talked about the Pertwee cliffhanger that was bad. Was there a cliffhanger here that you liked? What did you think of them?
Well, what do we have? We have the policeman being the Auton was kind of cool.
Yeah, I like that one.
Although,
that's my favorite.
Although it doesn't really stand up to reason because like the Autons could have just left the Doctor with the circus people to get beaten up.
Right.
Like if that was their evil plan. Just like they were doing it already. Why rescue him from that in order to kill him yourself?
And he was really
not very
like
effectively.
He was really like clocked back there. Like there's a point where like the Doctor gets clocked with like a 2x4 or something. And I'm just like, whoa! Like has that ever happened?
Yeah, clearly we know that does not hitting the Doctor with a 2x4 does not trigger regeneration. So you can do it as many times as you like.
It's got that healing factor.
It's kind of nice.
Yeah.
It's kind of nice, although I think you've pointed out the sort of continuity error that it's the wrong policeman who turns around, or it's a different policeman.
Yeah, it's weird. Well,
shot.
Because it's funny. I remember watching that as a kid, and the policeman who turns around, I believe I thought he was in the passenger seat, but I wasn't like, I don't live in Great Britain, so I don't think of the right side as the driver's side. And I realized, oh wait, that's the driver's side. And so. But then when they run from the car and the Autons trying to get out, he's on the other side. And so because the other one that doesn't have his mask pulled off comes out from the side the Doctor had pulled it off. In other words, I don't know what they were doing. Like clearly someone didn't pay attention to the continuity. Could be as simple as that, or maybe it was a mirror, like they flipped it in post, something like that. So gotcha. Guys, production
but
crew.
That seems a classic cliffhanger, whereas the other two don't really. Yeah. They're not really up to snuff. Like
there's the
Joe is smoking. It's going to explode.
Yeah, that was pretty bad. Well, it's also like that's a bad bomb. If you kind of partially open it and it partially explodes, So
and then the Doctor throws it out the window and it lands in a moat, which is like is unit now headquartered in a castle?
Right? That was weird. That was weird. But this is the first look at the new unit HQ in the Doctor's new lab, apparently, which stays pretty consistent throughout. But yeah, like the fact that they're on the Thames, I guess. I don't know. I do like the fun part of New Who where they use British landmarks or London landmarks often and turn them into either like the headquarters of various organizations or have some secret alien thing under them. I really wish they maybe done more of that in the classic series because there was definitely opportunity.
Yeah.
But no, it just seems like
put unit HQ in Windsor Castle.
Why not? Let's do it. Yeah. Man. So should we talk about what would have happened had the evil plot succeeded?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up because it is an interesting question, isn't it? Because the Master did not think through his evil plot.
He was worried about the evil plot succeeding.
he had not workshopped his evil plot, and then when he finally reveals it, the Doctor's like, "Oh yeah, but they'll kill you too." The Master's like, "Oh shit." I thought of that.
If the Master, you remember that Missy had previously encountered the monks, and it's clearly he hasn't done that yet because the monks are pretty good at projecting, like what's going to happen. So like just use a little bit of that monk technology, like hook up with them to simulate your plans, and just try to iterate a bit before you jump right in. I mean, this is back when you just jump right in and did things, right? It was the analog era. There wasn't so much of the analytics back in the 70s. I mean, you just did stuff.
It does sort of. It is. I love it because it's kind of an explainer of why the villain always reveals the plot to the hero while the hero is tied up. It's because he's actually workshopping it. He's actually like.
Doctor, I haven't really thought about this. It's good to talk about it and think out loud right now. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for brainstorming. So if it had succeeded, then the Nestine would have fully downloaded, I guess, to this radio telescope.
Right.
Which, by the way, I love being a huge fan of Logopolis and not really having seen this. I got a chill at the association of the Master and radio telescopes. I didn't really know that it went back earlier, and it had this wonderful mirroring with this episode in Logopolis.
Yeah, come to think
of it, the radio telescope will one day kill the Doctor.
Yeah, I guess that's his thing, the Master and radio telescopes. I hadn't thought about that.
But we had to go charging up it, despite the fact that we know he had vertigo.
Oh, that's right.
Maybe his vertigo was like a premonition of his next incarnation, dying from a fall from a radio telescope. Anyway, so the Master wants the Destinies to download, at which point they will, I guess, take over the Autons that he's already made, or just be able to turn all plastic in the world into Autons.
Well, first things first, the octopus arrives, right? There's just like a big octopus that would just drop, I guess, right there at the radio telescope. So it's got big Auton brain power. So then I guess it just starts possessing all plastic around. And plus the all the daffodils would kill tons of people, right? Or did they already harvest them? I forget. Did they?
Yeah, we don't really know. So the daffodils will kill you by shooting. We haven't even talked about this. That they shoot stuff onto your mouth and you suffocate.
Right. It's not bad. Honestly,
kind of
not bad.
scary.
But it's a very James Bondy plot, and which is fine because I liked the pragmatism from the Master, where he's like he kills people with the doll and the chair. And they're like, oh, I forget who it was. I think it was Farrell. He goes like, yeah, this will work, And the Master's like, well, no, it's inefficient. We need to kill as many people with as little plastic as possible. And I'm like, that's a good goal.
Yeah, that's great. But I don't think that daffodils are the way to go. It's weird that after that he's like, and he's super proud of his daffodil as well, which is again big shout out to Roger Delgado for making that line not ridiculous. Like he's just so proud of it. He's holding it, he's stroking it, he's like, look at this beautiful fake flower.
Maybe supply chains weren't quite as developed in the 70s, but I mean, I feel like you got to really be thinking more about distribution here.
Yeah.
To have this plot succeed. How do you get these daffodils all over the world? And
we need to call in the guy from The Graduate who gives Dustin Hoffman that advice about plastics.
Yeah,
I feel like he would have some advice.
Not only distribution, you got to get some marketing. You got to tie these daffodils in with an event of some kind, like National Daffodil Day. And that sounds lame, but get some celebrity endorsements on how important it is to wear a daffodil to support whatever cause is popular in 1971. What would that be?
Yeah. Or just wait until, if you waited until November, you could do it as poppies, which are ubiquitous in the UK.
Well, why not? He's a time traveler, right? I mean,
exactly.
TARDIS was busted at the beginning, but I mean, if he just came in, sometime in mid-October, well, you'd have to give himself more time to rev up the distribution and marketing plan, though. So I'm thinking summer. So you come in summer, you rev it all up, you get the production, it's worldwide. Poppies are mainly a Commonwealth thing, so you'd have to have sort of alternate flowers for alternate things, or maybe you'd have to turn Remembrance Day into an international thing. I mean, it is, but like more of a poppy international thing. You could do it. Maybe you could do this, Chris.
You could use comic relief.
Get together. I'm really
comic relief with the red noses.
There it is.
That would be the way to do it.
Yep.
Yes.
Red noses. Oh. Okay, we got this. We got this plan. we can remake this today. This will work. Terror of the Autons, the new Who version.
Yeah. I do wonder about the parts of the world in 1971 where plastic wasn't very common at all. I'm sure it wasn't as common in the developing world in that time.
That makes it even better there, because as long as your distribution is on point, you get it there, and it becomes even more of a novelty in these sort of third world countries where you're almost assured they're going to have it and wear it and have it on them when the radio telescope activates. So
you get the Autons to fly the RAF jets, and they drop daffodils on the world.
Yeah. Like there it is, and it's all humanitarian type stuff. This is great. This is great.
I love it.
We got it, dude. I mean, why aren't we plotting? We're plotters. Okay, so
if the Master is out there, just like to advertise our services, we can help turn your evil plots into successful ones.
So presumably, if it did happen and he got this plan together, most of humanity dies. The rest of the world is in disarray, and all the stored window dummies everywhere come alive, and other plastic cables and stuff come alive and imprison or kill the rest of humanity. And then it's like, okay, now what? I guess they turn Earth into a big plastic factory. Is that what the Autons do? And maybe Doctor's correct, then they also kill the Master, because what the hell.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because maybe they kill the Doctor and the Master, but the Master, like, this is, we don't know, it's not canonical, but we know that the next version of the Master we see, which may be supposed to be the Roger Delgado version as well, is on his last regeneration.
Right.
So maybe Delgado is on his last regeneration, or last but one, whatever. But either way, he's going to be killed before the Doctor is. The Doctor's going to regenerate into Tom Baker, and then maybe the Nestines get him again, and he becomes Peter Davison. I don't know, by the way, if regenerations come sort of preloaded in Doctors. It's kind of a fascinating question all of its own. But,
right. If you have an alternate timeline where you regenerate earlier than you would have, would you become the same person? That's a really good question. Wow, I would love them to sort of answer that. That's a great question, dude. I want to see a what if. Like, maybe you'd have to do this as comic strip or Big Finish audio, but you really do it as a Big Finish, given that they are so engaged with Doctors 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and now even 9. Right, and now
10.
even 9.
Like, you get all of them together in the same audio and have a what if episode where the Doctor just gets killed over and over again and preloads into these next regenerations.
Wow.
You'd have to get the guy who's John Hurt, or maybe John Hurt is only, if you get regenerated by the Sisterhood of Khan. I don't know.
Anyway. Sounds like a dark audio, but I'm there for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Totally into that.
So yeah, I mean, I think we just have Nestine. The Earth becomes Nestine world. Yeah. And the Master is either Master's probably dead. The Doctor is maybe regenerating as a prisoner of the Nestines, and
I think that the Doctor would probably be able to escape in the Master's TARDIS.
Oh right. Because he has the dematerialization circuit. He'd just run back. Yeah.
Why didn't he think of that?
Then he'd have to go back. Then he would go back and prevent it all from happening or something.
Yes, if it wasn't a Nexus point or whatever the anti-time travel flavor of the week is.
All right. Well, we've answered that riveting question. Chris, what was your final judgment here on Terror of the Autons? There's lots to like, some stuff to not like, interesting firsts. Some promise, certainly.
Yeah.
What did you think?
The editing was so bad, and the sort of the incoherence of the re-edited script so evident that I'm gonna give a split decision. I'm gonna say every time Delgado is on screen, it's a Dalek, and every time he's not on screen, it's an Ogron.
Yeah, that's a good result. I'm essentially giving it a Dalek. And our rating system, of course, is Daleks are good, Ogrons are bad, and for similar reasons. But it's a borderline. I think it's just so notable, and you're sitting up and interested in all of these things, most notably the Doctor Master rivalry, and that works for the most part. So I think that's what ultimately gives it a pass. But I just wish each time I was sort of sat up and was trying to look at something new and interesting, it actually sort of delivered on what the promise was, and often it does not, whether it's Joe or Yates or a lot of the nonsensical James Bond-inspired stuff. Good try.
Given that they just abandoned six-parters, like Inferno was the last six-parter, right?
Oh, Inferno was 7. Yeah.
7, sorry. The last the 7-parters. I feel like this could have ironically done with being a 7-parter because there are so many links that we're missing, like, from Joe spying on the factory to her suddenly being hypnotized by the Master in the next scene. Like
I want
the blink you miss it stuff from the museum.
Yeah, I want a whole episode that goes into this space museum. And like, who's the curator? What else? What other alien artifacts do you have? What's going on? When's the big Nestine exhibit opening up?
Pete, I think we know who the curator is, and I think he was sleeping on the job. I think he was spending too much time in the National Portrait Gallery.
That's true. Well, he had big plans for the future.
Yeah. He was acquiring his Gallifrey painting in unusual circumstances.
Yeah. All right, so split decision on the bottom line here. And it's time now, I think, to jump ahead.
So, yes, it's time to use the randomizer.
Or perhaps jump back.
Pete, do you have a spreadsheet of discrete
I
Doctor Who stories?
I have our extensive researched list of
do you notice the change that I've made?
Oh, I haven't. No. Oh my! You have a new column.
We have numbered it rather than just using the numbers of the cells, so that we no longer have to start at number 2.
Right. Wow. Well, I'm glad we don't have to start at number 2 anymore.
Yeah.
Number 2, not our best number. Okay. This is great. So as everyone knows, what we do every time we finish up a pod, we figure out the next pod, and the Doctor Who randomizer will take us to the next adventure we're going to talk about. And it is time. It is time to find out where we're going next. So
all right.
I should talk about the technology we use for randomness, because computers are very bad at picking random numbers. So we have gone to random.org, which Chris uses
atmospheric noise.
Yes, exactly. Atmospheric noise as the random element, the true random element, or as close to random as we can get it.
And I should also mention that it is unfalsifiable, because the result that they give you, like they give you a readout with the precise time that you generated this number. So, for instance, the other week when you were like, I cannot believe we've gone from Hartnell's The Rescue to Hartnell's The Sensorites, and you had that sort of particular history with the Sensorites, always falling asleep during it, and you're like, did you really pick that? Yeah, I really picked it. I can provide on demand a list of like the precise times at which I hit generate. So if anyone's out there wondering, they're clearly just sort of picking another story that they want to go to, no, we have proof that we are generating a random number at this exact moment. We're doing it live, Pete.
We're doing it live. We have sworn our fealty to the randomizer at the outset of this whole venture. No, we really randomize it, and we really do what the randomizer says.
Oh God, that's such a great classic Who story that never was. A race of people swear fealty to the randomizer.
I'm into it.
Anyway, so the first number is 1. The last number is 297. Correct.
All the stories, which we've organized by story, that have been a part of the televised program, and program with 2 M's and an E, of course. So, Chris, shall we do it?
Yes. You want to give me a countdown?
I'll give you a countdown. 16, 15. I did that joke last time. Let's just do it. 3, 2, 1.
Allons-y.
28.
28. Oh my, I'm excited. Oh my God. Oh, Chris.
Yes?
It's the 10th planet.
Whoa!
Wow!
Oh my God.
Oh.
It's our first regeneration episode story. And our first incomplete.
It is. It's an incomplete story. We're going to have to figure out how to watch episode 4, which is the only one that you can find. The other ones, the other episodes, and I think I have them somewhere, so we can collab on exactly how to make sure we can both see those. And then I know the regeneration sequence is preserved.
Yeah.
But I believe the rest of the episode is not, and I'm sure there's an audio that we could probably jump on.
There'll be audio, perhaps there'll be telesnaps. There's probably a novelization.
There's definitely a novelization.
I like that this is testing us, testing our completeness and our ability to sort of hunt down the missing parts of the story.
Yeah.
And I've never seen any of the 10th planet before, except for the bit that they have in Twice Upon a Time.
Yeah, this is really exciting. It's actually our second Cybermen episode that we've ever done. It's interesting that we've now going to have done 2 of those, but we've never done a Dalek episode. Oh, you know what?
Yeah.
And if you actually think about it, it's probably our third when we weren't doing random stuff so much, because we did talk about Ascension of the Cybermen.
We did.
But I almost don't count that.
Then we had Dark Water, Death in Heaven, which is probably...
Well, that was part of our the randomizer era.
Yes,
of the show. In the randomizer era, it's our second Cyberman episode.
So, that was really was it more of a master story than a Cyberman story? It's sort of 50-50.
Yeah.
But yeah, the randomizer clearly loves Cyberman. It clearly loves Hartnell.
Yep. Just like us, Chris.
This is actually the very first story that's even going to feature a single image of Patrick Troughton.
Indeed. Wow, I'm really excited about this one though. Like, it's awesome that we're doing this. Doing our first Regeneration episode is the first Regeneration episode.
Yes.
I think that's really, really cool. Oh wow, this is going to be a really fun one, and we'll get back to y'all on how we're going to do it. It's going to be fun. Well, actually, this will be a good one for show notes too, so that anyone who wants to watch it, we'll let them know exactly how we did it. Oh, awesome. Okay. Well, folks, this is it. You've gotten to the end of another episode of Pull to Open. We are a podcast, in case you weren't sure.
I thought we were just being broadcast by the master from Radio Telescope.
Right, that's how we usually do it. That's how we used to do it. But now we've gone full digital. We've sworn our fealty not just to randomness, but to Apple and iTunes and Spotify and Google and Breaker and all the great places you can find podcasts. If you haven't subscribed yet for whatever reason, please do. Please leave us a review if you have a little time. We love reviews. We like to read them out on the air. You can leave any kind of review you want. We have a special place in our heart for 5-star reviews, but you know what? You just tell us what you think, and we just love to hear from you. Follow us on social. Like we said, we're on TikTok at Pull to Open. We're sharing a lot of videos from the show, getting a lot of people commenting. It's really fun. We like to put footage from the show alongside snippets from our pod. It's really, really cool. We're also on Twitter. We're live tweeting what we watch. So watch for that at Pull to Open 63 on Twitter. And we're sharing some of our some stuff on Reels and other things on Instagram as well. And that's also Pull to Open 63. So Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Follow us on all the socials, please.
Yeah, big shout out to the TikTok user who pointed out my incorrect pronunciation of Scarce's Paradigm.
Yeah.
After school reunion, enjoyed that.
Didn't have the heart to correct you in the moment, Chris. Yeah, but
I'd love to mix it up.
It's all good.
So we'll see you on the socials, and we will see you next time.
Take it easy, folks.